fellow Sambarians. So, as you can see, I've got Goober Chan, my green Sambar Diaz, with me today. EN07F, which is fuel injected, KV4, which is four-wheel drive. We're going to be doing connecting rod bearings in this old girl today. She's been kind of making a little more chatter back there. That makes me very nervous. I have a sandbar here that's got a hole in the block, so I don't want it to get to that point. Depending on how well the oil was changed in Japan and how often it was changed in Japan can certainly determine how long those rod bearings are going to last. When I did do the red valve cover, it was pretty gunky inside, so I would say that it wasn't, oil changes weren't a top priority for the van. So with the noise that I'm hearing, which it's a pretty distinct noise, it's under high revs. You can hear it like a rattling noise a little bit. I'm starting to hear that. And other ones that I've changed the rod bearings on were really bad, and it was under any acceleration you would hear that. And that's basically, the rod slapping on the crankshaft. So I don't want to damage the crankshaft by spinning a bearing and all that stuff. I would rather just change the bearings now. So I'm going to, show you guys how to do it and just kind of recommend it as just a maintenance item. At some point in time, it would be good to change the rod bearings. It's an older vehicle, older engine. Depending on how well it was taken care of in Japan, could mean the bearings need to be changed yesterday, or you got some time. So just put that on your list of things to do eventually, is do the rod bearings. And being that parts disappear all the time for the Subaru, I'm going to do it now. So if I sell out and I can't get any more, I'm not SOL. So anyways, I'm going to be doing rod bearings in the van, which isn't that big of a deal. Amongst doing the rod bearings, this oil pan is extremely rusty, and it looks like a matter of time before Pebble pokes a hole in it and then I lose all my oil. So I'm going to do a new oil pan. We'll do a new block stiffener. We'll do a new oil pickup. Does it need it? Probably not, but since the parts are available and I have them on hand, I'm going to do it because it's good to replace the O-ring on the pickup anyways, just so you have good suction. So I'll replace the O-ring and the oil pickup and the block stiffener, and then I'll set those aside as good used parts. And then obviously change the pan. We'll change the oil. And you just need some good basic tools, a torque wrench, some engine assembly lube, and a feeler gauge, so you can check the play between the connecting rod and the crankshaft. So have yourself a feeler gauge handy. I'll put specs for that stuff up when I get to that point, and torque specs as well from the book that are supposedly right. But yeah, let's get cracking on this old girl. So I'm going to get her jacked up and we're going to pull the axle out. So this is what I mean when I say you can turn your spring and pull it out when you have, your strut or shock unbolted. You can turn this thing. It's got a rubber little bumper at top, but if you turn it, then you get the open end of the spring. And then you can pull your spring out. So no need spring compressor, using a spring compressor, just turn it, get it to the open side, and then pull it out. So I'll go and clean all that stuff up, but let me finish taking the shock off. We'll take this cover off, and then that way we just have complete access to everything. Okay, so as you can see, I have access to everything. Taking that panel off, which is 10 millimeter, 10 millimeter, and then there's a 10 millimeter on that little crossbar right there. Those are two 14 millimeters holding the crossbar up, so just take that off. That makes it easier. What also helps is let the e-brake go. Don't set your e-brake so you can get this thing to spin freely. And now I'm going to get the puller and we'll pull the inside, the inner axle out only. But I'll get the slide hammer, and everything is clean down here right now because I just did a timing kit. So new crank pulley, because these have a rubber balancer in there, so harmonic balancer, so these can separate over time. So I got a new pulley in there, new belts, new covers. So everything looks really good here. It's just when we go here, not so good. Not really leaking oil, it's just rusty. I mean, look at that. There's like chunks ready to come off of it. But yeah, let's get that axle pulled out now. So if you're still watching, good, because I'm going to give you a little tip here. So if you get a slide hammer off of Amazon or something, they're going to have two different tips or two different ends, claws. And the smaller of the two, I think it's like 40 something. I could be wrong, don't quote me. It's just the smaller one. The smaller one works on the sandbars for the front and the back. But let's say you have an Acti as well. The Acti takes the 63 millimeter claw, takes the bigger one. So just keep that in mind. If you get a slide hammer and you get the two attachments, the small one is good for the sandbar and the big one is good for an Acti. So I'm going to go ahead and take this one off, since I had to do an Acti, pull an Acti axle the other day to do a boot. We'll put the sandbar one on, or I should say the one that fits the sandbar. And I mean, this is a really good tool to have anyways. Makes pulling the axles out so much easier. It's still a bit of a struggle, but it makes it easier. So let's go ahead and pull this axle out. So pulling the axle can be a little frustrating. Just don't give up. Just the trick that I figured out, which, yeah, it sounds pretty obvious, but you don't really, in the moment, you're just frustrated. Pull on it. Pull on it as hard as you can. Like, really lean back as you're pulling on the end and slide the hammer back. Don't just use this as like the force to pop it out. You know, you really want to lean back, full body weight, and slam this thing back as hard as you can. That's the trick, because otherwise you'll be fighting it just trying to use this as the pull force only. But if you're just pulling on it and then pop it, you'll get a good pop, and then this will happen. Boop, there's our axle, it's out. So I'm gonna go, I'm actually gonna go get something to hang that thing up on so it doesn't just dangle and rip the boot. So I'll be right back. But okay, so I took a tow strap, I have it pulled up against the control arm and out of the way. That way we have all of this room. Now, I'm just saying, there might be some comments. You don't need to pull the axle. Yeah, I know you don't. You can do it with leaving the axle in, but it's a pain in the butt. Or at least it's just a lot easier if you have the axle out. So just, I don't know. I'm going to save myself the headache and remove the axle. I got some visitors. Where'd they go? Let's see. There, well, there's Mamacita. Hi, little peepees. Oh, hi, patitos. See you later. It's a hot one today. They're probably going to find a pool. Yeah, let's get that oil drained and get some new parts on this girl. So now that we have as much oil as we can drained, we'll get all the 10 mils. So there's a couple back there by the bell housing, and then along the top, and then along the side here. I don't usually remove this wire loom like support bracket deal. I usually just leave that on there. If you feel like you need to take it off, you can take it off. It's just a couple clips. But yeah, you can work around it pretty easily. So let's pop all those 10 mils out. So once you get all the bolts out, there's quite a few, it's probably going to be stuck to the block still. So get yourself a good rubber mallet or like a pry bar and carefully pry it apart. Oh, there we go. We're getting there. Put a pan down there just in case. Oh man, that's dirty. All right. Oh my gosh. It's pretty nasty in there. Not what I wanted to see, but hey. I kind of had a feeling it wasn't going to be clean by the looks of the rocker assembly when I pulled the valve cover off. But let's take a look at the oil pan. And you can see, so rusty. You can see it bubbling on the inside, so yeah, it's scary. Yeah, it was a matter of time for something broke that thing. Okay, so we're going to throw that guy in the trash. And now that we have our pickup and block stiffener exposed, I can't really get the camera in there. It's a bad angle, but once you see in there, you see block stiffener and you see the bolts. Let me just give you a visual by holding the camera down there. So that plate, that big plate right there that covers everything, is your block stiffener. That is your pickup. Obviously, there's something in there, probably some gasket material or gunk, but we're going to be replacing the oil pickup and replacing the block stiffener plate. So I thought I had bolts, but not entirely sure. We'll see what's in my stash, but we'll save the old bolts and put on the new parts. So let's get on that. So the very first thing you want to remove is your oil pickup. So that's just four 10 millimeters. So take your dipstick out, and right there's a 10 millimeter, right there's a 10 millimeter, and then down here are two 10 millimeter and a 10 millimeter. So remove your oil pickup, and some more oil will come out. So make sure you got something underneath there, because it'll kind of break the suction and more oil falls out. So now that the oil pickup is out, which there it is, I'll kind of look at it, see what we got going on in there. Now we can remove the block stiffener plate, which looks like a 10 millimeter, 10 millimeter, 10 millimeter, 10 millimeter, 10 millimeter, and then four 12s going across. So now we'll take that off. Block stiffener has been removed. Sorry, I can't get good video while I'm doing it. It's just I can't get my camera in here or hold it anywhere. So you get the 4 12s, 4 12 millimeters going across the center, and then you have 10 on the outside. So remove your oil pickup, 4 bolts, then remove your block stiffener. Both right there, which I have new parts, so they're gonna just get set aside. Now we have access to our connecting rods. So it's very dirty in here, which is a total bummer, but it is what it is. We are going to really do a good job. Let me fish out of this. There we go. Cleaning all the red RTV off of the block. I have a good carbide scraper, and gasket scrapers we'll use to get all that off, because we want it to be super clean. It might take a while to get the whole job finished, because you gotta let all the oil stop dripping down on the block, obviously. So you can do a really good job of just wiping up the excess oil at the bottom until it stops. But obviously you don't really want oil dripping down when you go to put the new pan in. So now we have access to our connecting rods. We can get our feeler gauge and see how we have side-to-side play. We can make sure that we are within, the factory specs of the play that it should have. Okay, please don't ask me if I saw this book. I do not sell this book, and I will not sell this book because it's a James Danko book, and it's not very complete, and I would not feel good selling it. So you can either buy it on Amazon or download it for free. if you're in the Sambar squad on Facebook. But some information here is helpful, but there's a lot of missing stuff in here. So no, I will not sell this book. I mean, to be honest with you, I bought it from GNR, which, no offense to GNR, they just copy and reprint James Danko book and then sell it bound, which, you know, good for them. They're making money, but you can get it for free online. So save yourself the money. Join the Sambar squad. Okay, so our side clearance right here is supposed to be 0.07, 0.33 with a limit of 0.4. So we're going to check the side throw, and here is our connecting rod cap torque, which I think is like 18 foot-pounds. If I'll do the conversion later, but I think it's like 18 foot-pounds or something. But we're gonna do 15-ish foot-pounds because 18 was really tight and I don't want to break anything. So I'm gonna check that real quick with our feeler gauge, and then, you know, pull the caps, and then that's our torque when we put our connecting rod caps back on with the new bearings. Okay, I'm gonna briefly kind of show you how to check again. It's a pain in the butt trying to show this stuff, but I'm not even able to get a 0.3 in there. I've got a 0.203 millimeter, 0.203 millimeter feeler gauge, and it like just barely fits in the side to sides on the connecting rods. So I am definitely way under, you know, danger zone, which is maximum 0.4. So that is good. Just check them all just to be sure we're good on that. So now let's start taking the connecting rod end caps off. I forgot to mention, the connecting rod end bolts, the end caps, are 10 millimeter. I thought they were smaller for some reason, but to make it easier to do the work, to turn the crankshaft, push the piston up and down, take your spark plugs out. So I'm going to take my spark plugs out. I forgot to do that, so I'm going to take my spark plugs out. That way we can turn the engine over and get stuff out of the way a lot easier than us trying to fight the suction in the cylinder. So yeah, 16 millimeter. Let's pull the spark plugs out. Okay, with the spark plugs removed, it's easier to turn the engine now or push the rods up and down the pistons, since there's no suction in the cylinder. So 10 mil. Let's start taking off the end caps. Pretty self-explanatory on how to remove the crankshaft, the connecting rod ends. Unbolt it, and then you can get a 17 mil on your crank bolt, and then turn it, and it will eventually just kind of loosen up. Don't use anything metal. I actually grabbed a plastic trim piece to help push the bearing out of the upper connecting rod because it's pretty well stuck in there, and we're going to see why it was a good reason to change the bearings. Here we go. There you go. There is the copper. Focus. There's the copper. So we're worn through the Babbitt or whatever it's called. So that was probably the noise I was starting to hear. That is the top one. Here's the bottom one, still silver. So usually it's always these upper ones that are going out. So that's why I say always change your oil. Change your oil more often than you think you need to change it, and add bearings to your list of maintenance parts, especially while these are still available, because who knows, they'll discontinue them and then we'll have to get oversized bearings, and which will cause, or undersize, and then machining stuff, blah blah blah. So these are standard. There's no marks on the crankshaft, which you can visually inspect. Rub your fingernail across it, see if you feel any gouges or anything. But yeah, that's exactly what I kind of expected to see, was that. So when you're doing this, the trick to do this while you're down here is you do not want to pull the piston connecting rod out too far, because you don't want it to pop past the piston rings. I don't know if it'll go that far, but I certainly don't want to test that theory and then have a piston that's stuck because we can't get the rings back into the cylinder. Again, I don't know if that'll happen. It might not allow it. The crankshaft lobes might hit the piston, but anyways, just be aware of what you're doing. You don't want to pull your piston out. I have it basically as far as it can come out, when it's at its bottom end turn rotation. So I got my little plastic trim piece tool, just pop the bearing out very carefully. You can run your finger on your crankshaft to see if you feel any grooves. Check your journals, make sure they're clear of any debris of such. Feel around the crankshaft. I mean, like I said, this thing was running fine except for I started here, just a little bit of noise, and it sounded like that connecting rod going out sound. So do one at a time. Take one off at a time. That way you can put it all back together correctly. So I'm just doing cylinder 4 right now. No, I'm sorry, cylinder 1 right now. We'll put the bearings in, and then we'll get this one all torqued up and ready to go to move down the rest of them. Also, make sure you pay attention to your orientation on your connecting rod end. There, it's got that end that's notched. You can look at the other ones. That's why I say do one at a time. It looks like a number and then a Y. So I think I believe the Y goes on the bottom like such. But just look at the rest of them before you put it in there and make sure you're putting it on in the right orientation so you're not jamming it in there upside down and it's not going to work properly. But I got my engine ultra slick lube. We will clean this up and we'll clean up the connecting rod in there, and we'll put the new bearings in and on the connecting rod in there, lube it up, and then we'll torque it down. So let me clean some stuff up and get it ready. Okay, so I only want to try to do this once because it sucks trying to touch the grease and then use your phone, and it gets really messy. So I take the ultra slick, I put it on both sides of the bearing just to make it easy to slide into the connecting rod end cap, and then obviously on top. And then there's some in that little journal there. And you're going to make sure that the bearing is pretty much flush sitting in there. And when you tighten it down, if it's off by like a tiny bit, it'll pull itself in straight. And then obviously in here as well, when we put the new bearing in, lube it up as well, and then get it in there flush with each end. Make sure the notches in the bearing line up with the notches on the connecting rod ends and the connecting rod itself, so everything's right. And then, like I said, make sure you put your end cap in the same direction as the rest of them are. So it looks like the Y is on the bottom, and yeah, that like Y is on the bottom. It looks like a 9, I don't know, some number on the top. So make sure that number is on top. I got I sprayed it down, the crankshaft. I sprayed it down a little bit with cleaner, and then put some of the ultra slick on the crankshaft itself. And we'll go ahead and put this back on, and then we'll torque it down, and I'll show you the torquing specs. Okay, so the book calls for 2.4 kilogram meters, force meters. So converted 2.4 to kilogram force meters is 18 foot-pounds. I'm going to go 15 foot-pounds and see how that feels, and that's about 180 inch-pounds. So I'll do 180 inch-pounds, and if that feels good, then I'll say I'll be good with 180 inch-pounds. I don't want to go too tight because I don't want to strip or break anything. 18 foot-pounds just seems crazy, which I think I did on the last ones, but other guys broke stuff. So maybe on the older trucks, it might be a little sketchier going that torque. But let's do 180 and let's see how that turns out. Okay, end cap torque. I like 185 inch-pounds. That feels super snug. It gets to the point where you're like, oh man, that's super tight, and then perfect. So 185 inch-pounds, whatever, just a little over 15 foot-pounds. Seems like a safe number. So I'm going to go with 185 inch-pounds across all of them. So that one is done. And we just, did one. You saw how that worked. So now we're going to go ahead and just do all three of them. And like I was saying, get yourself a wrench on the crankshaft. Get it all, there we go. So that one will be ready to go. Pumping oil out of my oil pump. That one will be ready, and cylinder 2 will be ready, and then we'll knock out cylinder 1. All of the bearings have been changed, torqued everything 185 inch-pounds all the way across. I gave it a good 3 or 4 turns, made sure nothing felt like it was binding up, nothing felt weird, very smooth. Then went back after I spun it a few times, retorqued it just to double check, doesn't hurt. So now we are going to, I have a carbide scraper and some gasket scrapers. I really like my carbide scraper I got off of Amazon. I'm going to use my carbide scraper and whatever to get all this red RTV off and just get it all super cleaned up down here. And then we'll go ahead and put the block stiffener back on and the oil pickup with the new O-ring in there back on, and then we'll put the new pan on. So let's get all this red RTV off now. Oh yeah, and let's review the bearings. So all the top half of the connecting rods, the upper portion, were all worn out. This one was really bad. It's got some pitting going on. After inspecting the crank shaft, everything looked fine. I'm not sure why that's pitting. I'll have to look in the book and see what causes pitting. I don't know if it's just heat, but that one's definitely most worn out of all 4. And the lower sections are, they're all good. They're all still silver. So it's that upstroke that's putting all the wear on the bearings and the connecting rods. So again, that's why I stress, always change that oil as often as you feel necessary, or I should say more than you think is necessary, just so you just keep these things all super lubed up and using a good oil that can handle high temperatures. So anyways, kind of fun. Got some bearings here. Okay, block has been cleaned up. I'll show it in a second here. This has been my go-to lately, this carbide gasket scraper. I got it off of Amazon, 2 sizes. So super effective at scraping like composite gaskets off the head, just kind of cleaning up surfaces. Really good. It has like, it just has such good bite on that tip. And I also have the Husky gasket scraper, but that thing is amazing. That's my new go-to for gasket removal for sure. But let's take a look so you can see. Let's do fisheye. So just get really clean all the way around. Where's my light at? Up in the, all the surfaces that mate with the pan. Just get really clean. You don't want any oil, residue or nothing on there. We want to make sure that RTV does really good because there's no pan gasket. So I'm going to let this sit for a little bit, make sure no more oil drips down. Now that it's all clean, and we'll get the oil pan
Well, no, we're going to put the block stiffener on and then the oil pickup and then the pan. Just getting a little ahead of myself there. Oh, because that pan has got to go. New block stiffener installed. So these two bolts right here are left empty because your oil pickup has two here and two here. So here's what I did for torque specs. Because the book I didn't see has the book doesn't have any torque specs for the block stiffener. It does, however, have torque specs for the oil pickup, which is about 60 inch-pounds. So this is what I did. These guys are obviously bigger bolts in the center, the 12 mils. I torqued these to 25 foot-pounds, which felt really good, nice and snug, not crazy tight. So 25 foot-pounds on the center guys, and the outer guys I torqued to 75 inch-pounds, not foot, inch-pounds. So just the smaller dudes. Like I said, it calls for 60 inch-pounds on these, but it just feels a little too loose, and I don't want it coming loose inside the engine. 60 inch-pounds is what I torqued the valve cover to, but we're going to torque these pickup bolts and the outer block stiffener bolts to 75 inch-pounds, and these are 25 foot-pounds. So I'm going to go ahead and put the new pickup on now. A new pickup installed, 75 inch-pounds for the small little 10 mils. That feels really good. I like that. So now that that's installed with the new O-ring, make sure you get that O-ring in there so you get good suction and oil pressure. Now I'm going to, I think I'm going to take a little break because I want to make sure all the oil stops dripping down. But we can prep the oil pan for gasket sealer and get ready to hang it up there. We won't fully tighten it, but we'll get it hung up there. So we let the gasket sealer adhere to the block first, and then once it's fully cured, then we tighten it. So yeah, let's just let this kind of do its deal. There's just a little bit of oil coming down, not a lot. So I would guess it should stop pretty soon, and then we'll get moving on.
So the trick with doing the oil pan correctly, um, and some of you guys probably know how to do it. I'm just telling you from experience. I wasn't entirely sure how to use a gasket sealer on an oil pan, and it probably took like 4 or 5 tries. This was a very long time ago, and I just kept getting oil leaks out the oil pan. I couldn't figure it out. So the trick to using a gasket sealer, if you have no pan gasket, is to lay your little 1/8 inch bead all the way around on the inside of the bolt holes. You don't need to go around it. You just one line inside the bolt holes. If you go around it, that's just you're putting so much RTV on there, and you risk getting inside and blah blah blah, getting up in the pickup and clogging that screen. It's a very fine screen. You just need to do a little bead on the inside. That's it. I'll show you. But the trick is basically to put that bead down, and you'll put it up against the block, and you will just take your bolts and you'll finger tighten them till it kind of just starts to squeeze out a little bit. And then at that point, you leave it alone, and you do that all the way around, finger tight, and you let it sit. It says an hour on the gasket sealer, the red RTV. This is stuff that pretty sure they use from the factory because it's red. I forget where I was going with that, but I think, oh yeah, that thing says let it sit for like an hour. I let it sit for like a few hours, and then come back and torque it. Torque all your bolts to 60 inch-pounds. 60 inch, not foot. There's a lot of guys that get confused with that. It's not foot-pounds, it's inch-pounds. Breaking valve cover bolts and stuff. 60 inch-pounds. And you'll torque it to 60 inch-pounds, and then you'll let it sit for 24 hours before you go and throw oil in it. I know it's a process and you got to be patient. but it's worth it because you don't want to have to take the axle out and do all that stuff all over again because you got impatient and wanted to put oil in it before it fully cured. So you really don't want it to leak. So I'm going to go ahead and put the gasket sealer on here, and then we'll get it all hung up to start drying. Okay, not very pretty, not my best work. My hands are a little tired. That bottle did not want to squeeze. But just a good like little 1/8 inch bead all the way around on the inside of the bolt holes. You don't need to circle around it, just inside. All the way around. Don't get too crazy, don't put too much because it will squeeze inside and we just don't want it to clog up an oil journal or something and starve a bearing. So I'm going to get all the new bolts and then we'll hang it up there so they're touching, and then that way we can get over here. We can let it start cure and then we can torque it up in a few hours. Right, oil pan is installed up there with all the new bolts, shiny bolts. I think I'm going to start adding that as an option because I do sell the oil pans, but not the new oil pan bolts. It just looks so much better with new oil pan bolts, all nice and shiny. So I'll probably start adding those to the website soon, especially since they're all nasty and rusty. But they're all like finger tight basically. So it just kind of starts squishing the sealing out a little bit, and then we're gonna let it cure for a few hours, and then we will come back and torque them at 60 inch-pounds all the way around, and then we'll wait like a good day and put oil in it. So in the meantime, I changed the oil filter, got that STI on there, really nice. But yeah, so it's really late right now. We will probably be finishing it up tomorrow, but boy, that looks good with the new shiny bolts and everything. So good, man. Engine looks so much better now with that oil pan and all these new side plastics and pieces. So much better. She's looking good, minus all these rusty spots, but we'll replace that skid plate, so that'll be something shiny. Anyways, I think I'm gonna call it a night, and we'll get back to it mañana. What's up, Sambarians? New day here. So, like I was saying with the oil pan, you put your sealant on, you finger tighten it up, and just so they're touching each other. Wait a good, it says an hour. I waited like a good 3 hours, and then I went and retorqued everything, fully tightened, and then now we're just about 24 hours after we put the pan on, so I can add oil to it finally. So let me show you the torque sequence just to kind of help you out with that. Obviously I already did it, but so you can visually see like a good pattern. So when you put your oil pan on, start with the center bolts, top, bottom, in the center, and then zigzag and work your way out. And then once you get to the outer ones, then go back around and just check the torque on all of them, and you can go in a circle at that point. But just start in the middle, and it's 60 inch-pounds, like the valve cover, 60 inch-pounds, all the way around. It's not very tight, but it's good enough. Pretty snug anyways. But yeah, start in the middle, diagonal, zigzag to the outside, and then go all the way around one more time, and that should be good. So now that that's all good, we should see just a little bit seeping out, not a whole lot, but just enough. You don't want to see gobs of it because then that means you put way too much on. But yeah, new oil filter, we're gonna put oil in it and fire it up and make sure we have no oil leaks and everything sounds hunky-dory. All right, I got my 5W30, about 3 liters inside the engine, obviously. and we're just running it to make sure we don't get any leaks. And so far, I mean, my main concern obviously was leaks from the bottom. And I don't hear any. I don't see any leaks. So that is good. But I'm going to let it idle for a little bit and just kind of keep an eye on stuff. Because again, I don't want to have to rip it all apart if it's leaking oil. But everything looks good. Everything sounds good. Yeah. So I'll kind of let that idle here for a little bit and make sure I don't hear anything weird or see anything weird that shouldn't be happening. But yeah, that's how you change your rod bearings in your sandbar. It's actually not as difficult as you would think it would be. It's just a matter of removing some stuff out of the way to give yourself, complete access, which again, you can do it with stuff in the way, but it just, to me, it's a lot easier to take that stuff out, and it doesn't take much time to take it out anyways. I mean, popping just that side of the axle out, it's not a big deal. And it's just peace of mind because, as you saw, I'm pretty sure I showed my bearings, they were really worn out. So it was time to replace them before it causes more damage. But yeah, there you go. That's how you change your rod bearings. So yes, I have those rod bearings on my website, and all the other parts I think mostly shown that I did in here are too on the website. So if you want to do this yourself, that stuff is all on my website to order, and I can ship it out right away, obviously, because I have them in stock. And yeah, I think the main issue is just paying attention to torque specs and making sure everything gets torqued correctly and installed correctly. Obviously, they're rod bearings. So yeah, cool. Thanks for watching, guys. okgarage.com for all that stuff. I'll have some links in the description. And yeah, appreciate it. Thanks for watching, guys. I'll see you on the next one.